Welcome to Today with Dr. Kaye. I'm Dr. Kaye Wise Whitehead, and I'm joined now by Greg Macpherson. He's a pharmacist, a biotechnologist, and author of Harnessing the 9 Hallmarks of Aging to Live Your Healthiest Life. For more than a decade, he's been working in the biotechnology sector, specifically focusing on the aging process at the cellular level. He is based in New Zealand. Greg, how are you? Thank you for joining us.
Super well. Thanks, Dr. Kaye. Great to be here.
It's great to have you. Can you just begin by addressing kind of the most pressing question that we all have? How was New Zealand able to keep the COVID-19 cases down so low?
Yeah, Dr. Kaye, we're just incredibly fortunate. We've got a huge, big moat that's keeping a bunch of people out of New Zealand, really, and we've got a really small population. So, even though we have COVID arriving at our border every day, we're able to isolate it and keep it within the quarantine section, and we've just been really, really fortunate. But I think it's inevitable; it will happen. We will get it into the country at some point.
But it's been amazing because for those of us here in America, as well as people who are based in India and Tokyo at this moment, where we're dealing with numbers that are similar to what we saw last year, particularly here in America. We were at a danger point where we were just trending so high with the numbers. Then we seem to have gotten them in control, and now we're back out there again. So do you think that with the Delta variant and the Gamma variant, those are the ones that might actually be able to get into your country?
Yes, I think that's exactly right. I think, we just all are feeling so fortunate right now that we're not having to deal with it and that we can live like fairly much normally. But there's going to come a time either where we have to open the borders because we can't keep them shut forever. It's just going to happen. So I think there's a huge push right now to get the vaccination done for everybody. And it appears that from what I hear in the news that potentially, even though the vaccine might not protect us from the Delta variant, it might protect us from some of the severe reactions that people are getting from it. So, certainly not a perfect world right now, right?
So what is the general feeling when it comes to the vaccine? I mean, as I sit here in a country where the vaccination debate has become extremely political, even with almost 600,000 lives lost in America and over 4 million lost around the planet, it's a political issue. Mask or no mask, vaccine or don't vaccinate. So what is the general feeling around vaccinations in New Zealand and of course around masking?
Yeah, I think it's quite similar to around the world. There are people that are a little wary about the vaccine for sure, and certainly same sort of issues around masking as well. So, and I have to be honest, initially I was a little wary myself, but as I start to understand the science better, understand exactly what the vaccine's doing, I get a lot more comfortable with it. And I think the reality is that even though we don't like it, for the greater good, we need to do it, and that's because ultimately that's the way we're going to get this pandemic under control. Rightly or wrongly, and I have to say I do. My opinion has changed from time to time because it's very new technology. But when you look in the background and look at the science, it just all makes really good sense. And it's actually not that brand new. It's been worked on for decades, and these kind of ideas. So no, I think ultimately when the time comes, I'll get the vaccine.
Well, then I have a question that's a personal question for me. So COVID-19 has aged me. I feel like I've gotten much older. I feel like my body doesn't move the same way. I have more gray hair now. So I know you work with, dealing with material around the aging process. So can you talk about the impact of COVID-19 on our bodies and how we've aged as a result of coming through the stress of it?
Yeah, so our bodies. Here's the best way to answer this. I think our bodies do. The COVID is putting us under a lot of stress, and that it is manifesting in how you feel, and it's actually in many ways accelerating the aging process for people, because what you're describing there is potentially symptoms that you might have as an older adult, if you will. And so our bodies and our cells have remarkable resilience, but when something like a virus comes in, it can actually have quite a significant effect on it, and it's really interesting. We may talk about a little bit about senescent cells a little bit later, and senescent cells are cells in our bodies that accumulate as we age, and they really don't appear to have any significant benefit. In fact, they have quite a bit of they have a detrimental effect on our body. And it turns out that it's possible the reason that older adults are responding so poorly to COVID is because of the buildup of these senescent cells. And some quite smart scientists have worked out a way to remove those cells. And in mouse models, when they remove those cells, the mice, when they're exposed to COVID, actually do really well. And so the Mayo Clinic is now evaluating that, and it could be that going forward, if we can actually remove these cells before we get something like COVID, then it's going to be a much better experience for our bodies.
That's really fascinating. How does that tie into the technology behind the new COVID vaccine that may be able to be used in the future of medicine as a whole?
Yeah, the technology is this mRNA technology is really exciting. If you imagine, if your body needs a molecule right now, what happens is your DNA opens up and a little molecule called mRNA goes across and actually reads what the code is on the DNA. And then that mRNA, once it's got that code, takes it across to the protein manufacturing machinery in your cell, and it makes that protein. So what mRNA vaccines are doing, or medicine essentially, is shortcutting that process and delivering the code direct to the cells so it can make the protein straight away without interacting with your DNA. So in the case of the DNA the vaccines we're talking about, it's coding to produce a little protein that's on the virus so that the body recognizes, that builds that protein, recognizes it's foreign and creates an immune response to it so that it speeds things up. So when it sees the virus, it can react really quickly, which is what we need to do. But for the rest of this technology, if we need an extra little bit of, estrogen or testosterone or something like that, we could be actually have that little molecule injected into our body, and it codes, it makes our cells essentially little pharmaceutical factories, which is not necessarily when we're young because everything's working well, but if we're a wee bit older and that bit of DNA is not working quite as well, then that's a really significant advance for us.
This is really fascinating because there were a lot of people who were concerned about the mRNA with the vaccine, thinking that it was going to change their genetic makeup, change their DNA. Was there any danger of that? Is that happening at all when you get the vaccine?
Yeah, it doesn't appear to be. No, it's not the cause. There may be, some feedback loops which make some changes, but in general, it's impossible. The mRNA is not designed to actually make any changes to DNA. It's designed to read it and then to do something after it's read it, i.e., make a protein or do something else. So logically, no, there is no DNA changing effect from the vaccine.
But we are minimizing our DNA every day. I'm thinking from the sun, from different things we're eating and doing. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, our DNA is a remarkable molecule. Most of us remember it from school, and it's when I was at school, that was sadly 30 years ago. It was just about DNA being the code of our cells, like the instruction set that our cells do, and that view of DNA has changed so much. It's actually a super vibrant molecule. It's opening and closing all the time. It's sensing what's going on within our cells, and it's responding. And so, but our environment, like our UV rays, pollution, our diet, lack of exercise, all these things actually conspire to damage our DNA. And our DNA gets damaged up to 100,000 times per day per cell, which is phenomenal. It's actually, sometimes when you think about it, phenomenal that we're here at all, given the challenges that these molecules have. But we have amazing repair and maintenance mechanisms inside our cells that constantly monitor. When it breaks, they sense it, they fix it. And so That's how we manage to keep our DNA in good space, and it's those mechanisms that start to slow down and break, and as we age, which then affects our I guess the fidelity, the affects our DNA and its ability to operate. And what people understand now is that, or scientists understand, is that DNA is the primary driver for age, and you actually need to really look after it. And that's so important. And you imagine, I'm from Scottish extraction, and I've got to put sunscreen on every day. And because if I don't, then my skin gets really badly damaged. And so that's a really good example of what you need to do in terms of just looking after your DNA across all of your body.
Then how do I do that? How do I look after my DNA? Something I never even think about, right? So how do I look after it?
Yeah, so there are things you can do like exercise and eating well are just good standard things. Certainly don't spend too much time out in sunlight, as in UV radiation damages your DNA for sure. And there's molecules you can take, supplements you can take, and a really exciting one I've learned about is something called hobamine. And hobamine is extracted from Himalayan Tartary buckwheat, and it's like an antioxidant without being an antioxidant. It just gets in there and really looks after your vital cellular components, and reduces the risk of damage from free radical stress, these sorts of things. So the main thing is, if you can slow it down, then you'll be healthier for much longer, slow down the damage from DNA.
Now, you talked about exercise and diet and UV rays. Do things like stress minimize your DNA? Because stress, lack of rest, do all those things impact or not?
It's such a good question, Dr. Kaye, because in the early days, I really struggled with understanding how stress can affect your cells and your DNA, but it can, and there are little things called telomeres on the end of your DNA. These are they're called telomeres, but they're essentially like caps on the end of your chromosomes or DNA. And when you're stressed, they get shortened a lot quicker. And other things that can cause them to shorten is oxidative stress, is like you say, lack of rest, and you actually have less. You have worse health outcomes if you have shorter telomeres. So again, if you can take supplements, and there are certain ones out there that can help you rebuild your telomeres, that you have a better chance of longer health.
Then let me get to your book, because I'm really excited about kind of laying out for people the 9 hallmarks of aging. I know you've harnessed those, but exactly what are they?
Yeah, so the 9 hallmarks, Dr. Kaye, are 9 causes of aging, and this is a paper that came out in 2013 by scientists, and it's a really important paper that described the 9 hallmarks, and they're to do with our DNA that we've talked about, but other things like mitochondria in our cells, and essentially these are changes that happen. And what they did to determine these hallmarks was they went into the lab and they made them a little worse, and what they found was it sped up the aging process. And if they made them a little better, it slowed it down. So what's exciting about this is that scientists now have like 9 targets to look at to say, okay, what can we do to slow the aging process down? And they're making some really significant advances. There are certain treatments that in animals, like mice, can extend life by 30%. And so, we're starting now to see the benefit of that with research which is happening in humans. And ultimately what it's going to mean that, we might not get 30% life extension, but we might stay a whole lot younger and a lot healthier for much longer. And why researchers are looking at this so closely is that, literally hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent on diseases like Parkinson's and cancer and cardiovascular disease and Alzheimer's, with really little progress. And so scientists are starting to go, well, wait a second, these diseases are actually symptoms of old age. Can we slow the aging process down and actually then delay these illnesses to much later in life? And I'm really confident that we're going to actually see that. And people like you and I, or everybody, we're going to see an extra maybe 10, 20, even 30 years of healthy life before we run into these problems.
So just as a layperson, as someone who doesn't understand the science completely, may not have the vitamins I need in my own life, if I want to slow down my aging, it seems like if I eat right, I mean, it's the same things our doctors tell us every year, right? Eat right, get more rest, exercise, take your vitamins, and try to avoid stress. Slow it down is the term you used.
Yeah, it's totally. I think one of the things that's been discovered is really important is a bit of fasting. Being hungry occasionally is really helpful. We are modern humans and ancient bodies. Our lifestyles and how we live right now, our body's not actually very well adapted to it. So, back in maybe 100,000 years ago, there were periods in our history where food wasn't that easy to come by, and our bodies actually developed remarkable, like, housekeeping mechanisms that it uses when it gets hungry. And what we've learned is that those housekeeping processes can remove old cells and things that aren't working well. And nowadays, we don't often give our bodies the chance to do that. We're eating all the time. We've got food available to us. So being hungry from time to time, I personally have 2 days a week where I just have one meal, just my evening meal, and the rest of the time I eat regularly. But those 2 days off food essentially gives my body time to kind of clear out the junk that may have built up, and that's quite an important process to do, and we really encourage that. We're starting to know now that having a plant-based diet is actually really, really helpful. And these supplements like hobamine, and there are various other enzymes that we can now replace in our body, something called NAD, which is it's really important enzyme which helps with energy production and helps with the repair and maintenance in our cells. It declines from our 30s, and we've got ways to top it up now, which is really interesting. And so we're actually starting to get insight, and you can read it in my book, about what we can do and what we can take, which gives us a much better chance of arriving at old age in really good health and really good energy.
Well, I'm excited about that. I was thinking as soon as you said about 2 days a week of fasting, this big wave around intermittent fasting, like that's a big thing. Fasting from, 9 p.m. to 9 a.m., but really being intentional about ending your eating earlier, so 7 or 8 o'clock, and then starting later in the morning.
Yeah, that's right. And everybody's a wee bit different. Some people, that's a really tough thing to do, but if you can start by just maybe skipping a breakfast from time to time, what are you doing is you're training your body to actually start to get its energy from not just food, but also from fat deposits in the body. And it's really hard to start, but what's happening is that your body is getting a little bit lazy, and so in terms of it just says, right, I'm only going to take energy from food, and I'm not going to take energy from elsewhere. But if you can actually slowly train your body by skipping the occasional breakfast, it's really good. And then if you're feeling really brave, you could skip breakfast and lunch. But it's also it's really important you do it sensibly as well, because if you fast all the time, it's not good for you. So it's about just doing it sensibly. And if you really want to have a talk about that, have a chat to like a pharmacist or a doctor about what's best for you. Certainly, if you take it to the extreme, then it's bad for you. So it's important that people look at it, do a bit of reading, and then have a chat to their doctor about it.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Greg Macpherson, who is a pharmacist, a biotechnologist, and author of Harnessing the 9 Hallmarks of Aging to Live Your Healthiest Life. He's based in New Zealand. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Dr. Kaye, it was a pleasure. Great to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you.